everybody, welcome to Black Spring. And today I'd like to open with lesson number 2 from On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. Quote, "It is institutions that help us to preserve decency. They need our help as well. Do not speak of, quote, our institutions, end quote, unless you make them yours by acting on their behalf. Institutions do not protect themselves. They fall one after the other unless each is defended from the beginning. So choose an institution you care about, a court, a newspaper, a law, a labor union, and take its side," end quote. Again, that excerpt comes from Timothy Snyder's quote, On Tyranny, end quote. It also brings me to a story today that we have from the New American. That particular story comes from a bit of a patriot on the front lines. Now, this is an Idaho sheriff that responds to a New York Times media and critics over his virus versus liberty appeal. Now, this is actually written by or interviewed by William F. Jasper, and this is from the Bonner County Sheriff Darrell Wheeler's open letter to Governor Brad Little, as has been widely misrepresented. So, when he penned a short and simple letter to Idaho Governor Brad Little questioning the wisdom and constitutionality of emergency stay-at-home directives concerning the pandemic, Bonner County Sheriff Darrell Wheeler was not expecting the media firestorm and the avalanche of over-the-top condemnation that has rained down on him. Now, the New York Times suggested that the sheriff was leading a, quote, rebellion that, quote, threatens to undermine the pandemic orders, end quote, and quoted area doctors that condemned the sheriff's call for moderation in a response to the pandemic. One physician, a prominent surgeon, went so far as to call the Sheriff Wheeler's letter appeal criminal, end quote, and stated that Sheriff Wheeler and Idaho State Representative Heather Scott, who supported the sheriff's appeal, might be denied medical care as a result. Dr. Robert J. Burnett wrote in an April 5th letter to the editor in the Bonner County Bee, in the event that either Sheriff Wheeler or Representative Scott happen to contract the pandemic and need hospital care and or a ventilator, quote, that I and all of my coworkers take comfort in knowing that because of your behavior, you've essentially relinquished your claim to any of these potentially scarce resources, end quote. Okay, by the way, I'll go on and say that Sheriff Wheeler has been besieged by national, state, and regional media, but has declined to accept any interviews or issue any additional statements. And here I'm bringing you the actual interview that the TNA, the New American, has had an exclusive interview, and it was conducted on April 8th at a ranch near Sandpoint, the county seat, to avoid the frenzy of media pack and that has hounded around him since the issue of the letter. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take you to that story now. I'd like to thank everybody for joining me on this segment of Black Spring with Autumn.
I'm Bill Jasper with the New American Magazine, and I'm here in beautiful Sandpoint, Idaho with Bonner County, Idaho Sheriff Darrell Wheeler. Sheriff, it's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Good to see you again.
And you have been a target of major media coverage in the last few days because of a letter which you sent to Idaho Governor Brad Little. And that has ignited a media firestorm. And just reprise for us, if you would, and I'll read a little bit of the letter, what it was that you were asking Governor Little to do.
So, Bill, initially I had questions about the research and the science on how it was presented to the governor, and I wanted to challenge that, and I wanted our local legislators to get together and actually discuss the process that the governor has gone in issuing the stay-at-home order, and I wanted to access the system that has been set up in Idaho and all of the other 50 states. Part of our legislative system that they're our representative, and there should be some discussion and talk. And so I challenged the governor and encouraged our county to get back and our state to get back to work. And so that was kind of the emphasis of me sending that letter to the governor.
It's a fairly short letter, and I will read some of it. It will be available on our website. It says to the governor, 1, the reliability of the information disseminated by the World Health Organization. 2, our response to that information. 3, the cause and effect devastation caused by our response. And 4, our responsibility to change course. And in the spirit of changing course, I'm urging you to call up the full Idaho legislature and assemble them for an emergency meeting in Boise to discuss these points. I do not believe that suspending the Constitution was wise because COVID-19 is nothing like the plague. We were misled by some public health officials, and now it is time to reinstate our Constitution. Calling for the legislature to come together on this is a fairly reasonable thing, isn't it?
I think so.
That's what the legislature is supposed to do, correct?
Correct.
And so your idea was that the legislature would get together and we would have the lawmakers decide what government's proper response should be.
Correct.
Immediately, this was brought up in the media, however, as being some extreme position. And then we had a public health official, a doctor from Kootenai County, which is south of you, it's bordering on Coeur d'Alene, Dr. Burnett, who wrote a letter criticizing you, in which he made a very incredible statement. I'll just read a part of it. Quote, I realize that the pandemic is not much of a concern to those uneducated people who believe this threat is a hoax or overblown, but I want you to know that in the unlikely but possible event that either you or Sheriff Wheeler contract the coronavirus, and in the less likely event that you will require hospitalization, and even less likely the possible event that you would require a ventilator, that I and all of my co-workers take comfort in knowing that because of your behavior, you have essentially relinquished your claim to any of these potentially scarce resources. It is probably for the better that a ventilator go to a healthcare provider anyway. End quote. That is an amazing statement, public statement for a physician, a medical doctor, to make. What does that say to you?
Well, I was first of all appalled to hear that, but then I understand some decisions are made because of fears and because of ideologies that they may adhere to, and I wanted to, I think, really respond it in a way that would honor our county, honor the sheriff's office, and also honor people that are actually looking at what kind of reactions that I'm getting here for my call. It's really important, Bill, that you understand that the essential services that was established primarily and ultimately by only the governor have been challenged throughout the state, and I think that's one of the things that was disturbing to me, and that's why I called the legislature. I think that there should be a conversation on what is essential services and what are not. The decision to adhere to the stay-at-home order, which I have been abiding by ever since that came out, really put this economy at risk, and it's pretty much destroyed the Idaho economy because of that decision you made. In my letter to the governor, I cited that Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, he decided that meeting and church services were essential to the health and welfare of the economy and of the state of Texas. And I asked him to reconsider because the governor of Texas gather together and worship. And I think it's dangerous when you pass an edict like that, that there should be consideration, and especially we need to reach out to our local representative. We have a representative form of government, and unfortunately, the result of having a part-time legislature, they're not at the State House and they can't address this. And so that's why I asked the governor to reconvene the legislature. Let's have a discussion about the criteria that he has picked, and even though we're trying to stay at home and keep that social distancing, with the technology we have today, we can do a Zoom conference. There's nothing that prevents the governor to gathering both sides of the House, both the House and the Senate, and have a discussion with this. And I think the people should be heard. I think we have that representative government, and that's what I'm encouraging the governor to do. And unfortunately, because I've stood up for the people, at least here in Bonner County, I am being criticized for trying to show my disrespect to the medical community. I am not a medical professional, and I never inferred that I was, and that was never part of my letter. It was just, let's take a look at this whole process. In fact, just yesterday in the press conference, the President of the United States said that he is freezing money for the World Health Organization because they've been providing false information. And I kind of a little bit feel vindicated that my letter from a week and a half ago has been vindicated by the President, because now they're looking at some of the research that the World Health Organization has brought forward, and these professionals are making the decision on that type of research.
Right. The World Health Organization has been called on the carpet by many scientists, physicians, statisticians, long before this, because of the politicized nature of their health reporting and their statistics and their agenda. And they are pushing now, as we've been reporting, for this global health agenda, global health governance, global health security, in which the World Health Organization and the United Nations would take presumptive authority over these areas. One of the things that's come up is that you apparently don't have any consideration for the health of your community, etc. But your office and your officers, your sheriff's deputies, have dealt with various kinds of, with HIV, tuberculosis, other different things. And how are they dealing with the...
So actually, it was actually almost a week before the governor's order for stay at home. We initiated precautions with all of our deputies. We changed our procedure on the type of calls to minimize the contact we're having with the public. We have provided masks and gloves. The process of the intake process of anyone being booked into the jail has changed a week before his order came out, with medical staff assessing every person coming in, taking them to the hospital for tests if need be. We even cleared one housing unit just to house patients that may be suspect of having a fever. But I'm very thankful to the Lord. We have not had any cases in the jail that we're familiar with. No one that we've been in contact that have been booked into the jail have been tested and tested positive, and we've reduced the risk. All of my staff have gloves. We have wipes. We have cleaners. We've take all of the precautions. So we have actually adhered to the recommendations from the governor and those orders, and we have not deviated from those since we initially started those processes. And I personally take a responsibility for my employees and the people that live in the county. And we have furloughed those employees, very few of them, that have health risks. We have minimized our contact with the public, and we're taking, appointments for driver's license for people that have to show up and get commercial driver's license. But we've also taken those kind of precautions. And I think it's interesting what I think this phenomenon has happened here is, I think all of us, and especially law enforcement and business general, are looking at the procedures that we have followed in the past. And I know personally, we're going to change those kind of precautions. I mean, that's going to last forever as long as I'm in office. Reducing the amount of people that are in the office at one time. If people show up sick, refusing them to come in until they're better. Not allowing just large crowds of people coming in together. So, I mean, there has been a little bit of a blessing because of this, because we're hopefully going to make our community safer because of it. But I've been made a monster in the public because they have missed. Most of the people haven't even read my letter in that one, and they have not even looked at the precautions and the policies that I've taken and the responsibility that has been rested on my shoulders for the employees that serve our community.
It did not surprise me that the New York Times would be jumping out of the gate to come and do a story on this. They, as well as the more local Spokesman Review in Spokane, Washington, other media have been attempting to portray anyone who questions all of the vast new powers as some kind of irresponsible yahoo or belligerent sort of. You're not advocating any kind of riotous rebellion or anything of that sort.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, my family will be attending church services Sunday via Facebook and the internet. We ordered hymnals so that we can participate, and we're going to be doing worshiping the same way that hopefully most people in the community are doing. And I've never advocated any kind of protest without the county throughout, and I think we should take precautions and protect our families, just common sense precautions. If you're sick, stay at home. If your family members are sick, stay at home. If you have family members, as I do, that need to be protected, there's a lot of us that have family members that you have to avoid those people that are sick. And we take those precautions, and we have for years, and I think everyone should just use common sense and do that. But do we need to close down our economy and do that? I think it needs to be reviewed by those who represent us and needs to be addressed in our state legislature.
Well, very good. Have you heard back from the governor?
The governor has not reached out to me.
Well, thank you, Sheriff Wheeler, and keep in there doing your good job.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning into this segment of Black Spring with Autumn. And I will close out with my tag on this. Now, this particular incident with the sheriff and, of course, the propaganda ministries and the media, of course, in this case, the offense here, or the risk here to our freedoms, is, for one, of course, the First Amendment and the right to assemble, to peacefully assemble. And then the other part of the offense seems to be a bit of a Groundhog's Day offense. It's because here's another situation in which we have a government or we have congressmen and women serving in our government that are perfectly fine or perfectly disloyal to the Constitution seems to be on a regular basis throughout their careers. And in that, I mean by the transfer of governance. He spoke of a transfer of governance on a global scale for a global health type of governance. That's another transfer of power, and it's a power that would, of course, it would be a remote power to transfer any type of power to any type of supranational organization or institution such as the UN or the UN's parented group, the WHO, the World Health Organization. But there again, you've seen another instance in which Congress was willing to make the same types of transfer of power when it comes to our trade we have, of course, with the World Trade Organization, or even the protections and the social protections and the governance that would be included in the USMCA would be done by those governances, and those negotiations would be done by a remote committee that would be appointed by whomever the USMCA, whoever the negotiations committee decides to appoint for those committees. They would make the decisions, not the American people, not the Congress. The U.S. Congress would not make decisions on our actual trade agreements, much like if we were to transfer power in alignment with the UN and their agenda to the World Health Organization, or take their recommendations or their agendas and implement them into how we're handling pandemics and epidemics going forward. So that's a measure in which is outside of the Constitution, their oath of office. And I mean, I've said previously, they do have, the Congress does have enumerated powers in which they can make specific, decisions. But this is another risk, the transfer of power and the transfer of governance for our actual health care here in the States. So those are the risks, and those are, of course, that makes us less free, and it takes the power out of the hands of the people. And it's nice to see that the sheriff here is very patriotic, and he knows the power of the county seat, and that's where he's starting from. And of course, I guess we'll stay tuned and we'll see what happens from there. But let me know, what do you think about this particular situation? I know there's many things that are happening in all over the country, all over cities, and just everywhere you can imagine. But I will say that this particular type of action, it does change the culture. It does bring out the inner tyrant in many people. It's bringing it out in our neighbors. It's bringing it out in the grocery store workers, or in security officers. It's actually, it's given some authority to our neighbors when it comes to policing and calling the police for your neighbors or their behaviors. But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this is a change in culture? Do you think that the states can handle this in a much better way, without such, infringement upon our rights, our liberties? And I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Please write your concerns or your comments, and if you'll hit the like in the unlike button, or the share, subscribe, whatever speaks to you. And as always, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this segment of Black Spring with Autumn. Have a great weekend.